meeting from multiple locations. Therefore, your patience is greatly appreciated should we need to deal with any technical matters during the course of the meeting. Could all participants please ensure that they can be heard and seen on screen when actively participating in the meeting. At all other times, participants are kindly asked to keep their visual and audio off to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. This meeting will be conducted in line with the standards set out in Section 19, Appendix 2 of the Council's Constitution, and I kindly ask that all participants adhere to one speaker at a time. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please press their request to speak button and wait for an invitation to address from the chair. For individuals participating from the council chamber, this is the button available on their desktop microphone. For remote participants, the button is available on screen. So thank you very much. Go to the agenda then. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Pam Drake, Joanna Prothero and Councillor Nicholas Wood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2 then is the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July 2022. They are there before you. Pages 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124 and 125. Anyone prepared to move that they are correct record? Thanks you, Councillor Hooper. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Sorry, Chair, I just noticed Councillor Wood has just joined us.
Oh, thank you. So
apologies. I have been able to attend. My apologies.
Thank you, Chair.
Nice to see you here, Councillor Wood. Thank you.
Thank you.
So everyone in favour of those being a correct record for the meeting, please show. Thank you. Item 3 then on the agenda is to receive any declaration of interest under the Council Code of Conduct. No, thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is then the Vale Little Morgan Annual Performance Calendar 2022-23. Obviously, the report, I assume, has gone to Cabinet in July. And Tom, I think you're taking us through this.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Yeah, good evening, committee. This is a reference from Cabinet. It's been referred to all of the scrutiny committees, including Governance and Audit Committee as well. And the report is doing a couple of things. Firstly, the report sets out some of the new performance duties that were introduced as part of the Local Government and Elections Act in 2021. They're the Part 6 provisions of the Act, which require us to keep performance under review, and we do that through an annual calendar of different reports, and I thought it was useful to bring to committees, especially considering we've got a large number of new members and lay members, especially for Governance and Audit Committee. Thought it would just be useful for elected members and lay members to have in one place a bit of the architecture, if you like, Chair, in terms of what the performance calendar does. So the report describes that in some detail, but at Appendix A to the report, you've got a table showing how the various different reports come together over the year in order to demonstrate that we're exercising that particular duty under the Act. So one of the things that I was keen to do is give elected members and lay members the opportunity to influence the way that these reports are constructed as well. So members will note that there are a series of light blue colour boxes shown in Appendix A. They're informal sessions with elected members and lay members in order to give you the opportunity to discuss and influence the way these reports are put together. We had one of those just before the recess, looking at how the self-assessment was reported to different committees, and that was a really positive session. I've got another session in the diary for later on this month, which is going to be looking at how do we report performance on a quarterly basis. And what this does is give you, across the 12 months, a bit of the architecture, as I say, about how the various reports come together, most notably, rather, the annual self-assessment, which is later on your agenda, the quarterly performance monitoring, and then the construction and publication of the annual delivery plan. plan. So the calendar's here for your committee to review and to note, and to refer any comments back to Cabinet for their consideration.
Thank you, Tom. Firstly, are there any questions? Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Tom. As I was going through this, I just seem to, one of the concerns I've got is that staff engagement seems quite late on the process, and it seems to be more of a post-decision consultation type exercise rather than them being engaged early on, and I think that's potentially a missed opportunity. And it seems as though there's quite a hierarchical structure to it, in that you've got senior development team players working on it, members working on it. But I think just from my experience, you tend to find that staff members actually have a lot of useful content very early on. So I was just wondering where, I suppose unions could fall into that category as well. So maybe I'm missing it on here, and maybe they are involved early on, but it doesn't seem to be so clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I think certainly we could make the involvement and engagement of our trade union colleagues and staff clearer in the calendar, and certainly we could reference that if committee were minded to in comments back to Cabinet. I suppose this report is predominantly showing almost the statutory consultation phases of the self-assessment. So so there is a duty to consult with staff, trade unions, business and residents. But what's implicit in our work is that ongoing piece of engagement that we do across the community and our staff. So, for example, the annual staff survey influences aspects of our work in other ways. But absolutely, I think it could be clearer.
Anyone else got any questions? No, I'm glad you raised that, Councillor Hooper, because I raised it with Tom as well. It's not just the internal staff engagement, it's also the trade unions, but more importantly, the public and the business community, because there's a statutory duty, as Tom said, is to consult and engage with them. And if you don't give them adequate time, then why bother? So I agree totally with you, and I think Tom has indicated that I think it needs just to be shown in the calendar when it's taking place, so that people are aware that it is taking place, as long as that's not an issue. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions, are there any comments from anyone? No, you see the recommendations contained within the report. The first one is that the annual performance calendar 22-23 and the proposed approach to engaging with members in year to shape and refine the annual performance calendar and associated processes, plans and reports to enable the council to meet its new performance requirements are endorsed, and secondly that the report be referred to all scrutiny committees and the governance and audit committee, with any views being referred back to Cabinet. Should scrutiny committee make no further comments, Cabinet would consider the annual performance calendar for 22-23 as agreed. Should that say should scrutiny committees or the governance and audit committee?
Good spot.
Right. So subject to that slight amendment, and obviously subject to the comments that are made about the other consultees in accordance with, I think it's section 92 of the Act. If you could pick that up, please. Can I have someone move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconder? Councillor Matthew, sorry. All in favour? Yep, thank you, that's carried. Next item then is item 5 on the agenda, draft Vale Glamorgan annual self-assessment 2021-22. This went to Cabinet on the 8th of September and it's here for us to consider. Tom again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a presentation that is on the screen for those of you who are in the chamber this evening, and I know Gareth is projecting this for those people who are online. This presentation, the format and approach is as a result of that workshop that we ran with elected members before the recess, and this is bringing to you at the draft for consultation stage our annual self-assessment report for 21-22. And this is part of those new performance requirements that the Chair just referenced. So we need to keep performance under review, we need to consult on that performance, and that's the stage that we're at currently, and report on that performance through a self-assessment process. There are a couple of other provisions around independent panel peer self-assessment or peer assessment that will come later on in the electoral term as well. And the purpose from the Act of annual self-assessment is around embedding that culture of evidence-based and outcome-focused performance, self-reflection and challenge in order to make sure that we carry on improving as an organisation. And we're required to consider our performance requirements very much in the context of these questions shown on the screen. So are we exercising our functions effectively? So how well are we doing things? Are we using our resources economically efficiently and effectively? So the Act specifically requires us to demonstrate value for money. How well are we run in terms of governance, and how can we identify what we need to do better? And the Local Government and Elections Act provides for specific roles of your particular committee chair. So you are required to receive the self-assessment report as soon as practicable after the end of the financial year, and we're bringing that to you now. And you get 2 bites of the cherry with this. You will receive the draft, which I'm bringing to you this evening. You'll also then receive a copy of the post-consultation annual self-assessment, including the details of that consultation that we've just been talking about. You also then have a duty under the peer assessment approach to receive the draft of that report as well as the Council's response to it. And this screen here just shows how all of this work fits together, and we've just been talking about a large amount of this in terms of the annual calendar of performance. But the idea is that we have a 5-year corporate plan. It spans the 2020 to 25 period, and we produce an annual delivery plan for every financial year, setting out the specific commitments that we're going to take, and that then is complemented by a series of other corporate strategies around integrated planning and insight. So, for example, the medium-term financial strategy, our corporate asset management strategy, our people strategy, for example, and all of that work is then expressed within annual service plans, where we set ourselves targets and actions that we're going to take across the year, and scrutiny committees receive a quarterly report on how well we're doing against those. We then go through a process of combining all of that into a self-assessment report, and this is the first year, Chair, that we've done it in the way that we have, and we're bringing both the performance aspects and the value for money aspects together. We're currently out to consultation on the draft findings, the judgments that we've drawn of our performance, and as I say, I'll be bringing that back to your committee in October, post the consultation closing. Once we've agreed that at full council, we'll use the areas that we've identified for improvement to inform next year's annual delivery plan. So you see this kind of virtuous circle of performance being followed. So we're currently looking at the table on the right-hand side of your screen. We're currently at the penultimate box on that. So we've gone through a process of doing some self-assessment for each of the directorates. That's been undertaken by directors plus their management teams. We then ran a series of peer challenge sessions where, as directors, we were challenged by one of our peers in audience with the Chief Exec, the Leader of the Council and relevant cabinet members. We've gone through a moderation process then to make sure that the judgments are being equally and consistently applied across the assessments, and they've then been combined into what is in your papers this evening in terms of the draft, which is now out for consultation. So the next few weeks are shown on this screen. Currently the assessment is making its way through the scrutiny committees as well as coming to your committee, and is being consulted on with the trade unions, with our staff and also with residents. It'll come back to your committee, as I say, Chair, before it's then presented to Cabinet and then on to full council. We'll then start the work on next year's annual delivery plan. And the context of the ratings that have been reached, The overall performance assessment gives a rating of green. That's as a result of the fact that over 85% of the commitments in the 21-22 plan had been met. And in terms of the themes that the self-assessment has been constructed around, so things like Project Zero in our response to climate change, tackling the cost of living crisis, for example, as the majority of those commitments against those themes have also been met, we've again identified a rating of green. Looking at the way that the council's resources have been utilised, again an overall rating of good has been given, so that includes people, assets, finance. Because we can demonstrate that we've used resources in a way that puts us in a position that we will be able to improve in the future, and that we have delivered those commitments against a backdrop of real challenge. This particular year was the second in terms of the pandemic, and also had obviously resource challenges associated with it. We can also demonstrate through the self-assessment process that the 5 ways of working that are the demonstration of the council's duties under the Sustainable Development Principle were complied with, and we can demonstrate that there are robust mechanisms and practices in place in order to make sure that our resources are used to achieve value for money. And considering as well the judgment that was drawn from the head of internal audit's opinion of reasonable assurance provides us again with further confidence in reaching that particular draft judgment. Shown on this screen is the performance snapshot against the 2021-22 annual delivery plan. And what you can see here, Chair, is that in the vast majority of our actions were rated green. There's a mix of green and amber in terms of the measures that demonstrate our success in delivering those particular actions, and then when you combine them, committees have seen this as part of their end of year performance monitoring. So overall the annual delivery plan has been rated a green in terms of it being delivered. And looking at the themes that we're using to construct the self-assessment, again, around Project Zero, the response to the cost of living crisis, involving our communities, improving infrastructure, providing care and support and transforming how we work, the vast majority of these commitments in the plan have been achieved, so therefore a green rating has been delivered. And when we look at the Directorate self-assessment summaries, so when we looked specifically at the value for money aspect in reaching conclusions as to how well we've managed our assets, people, finance, our performance, using engagement insight, we reached an overall conclusion that those were being managed in a good way, which is shown on this particular screen here. And I referenced earlier the annual governance statement and the reasonable assurance opinion of the head of internal audit, and also the reasonable assurance from the annual governance statement that I know your committee has seen recently. I won't run through these in absolute line-by-line detail. There are a couple of slides, and I know elected members have got a copy of this, and this is obviously within the report itself. But whilst we've got a green rating for our use of resources and the delivery of the plan, it's really important to major on the purpose of this particular exercise, which is to identify areas that we want to do more of or we want to do better at. And we've done that on both a corporate and a service level, and there are some examples shown on your screen here across the breadth of activity that the council's involved in. So looking at tackling workforce attraction and retention issues, looking to enhance our employment offer, the review of the pay structure, which is currently underway, responding to different ways of working in the future, how we go about mitigating the impact of funding reductions, maximising the use of resourcing, and also developing our approach to things like our procurement strategy, as well as important issues around demand management and responding to increasing complexity in demand as well. And this list goes on. You'll see we've identified a lot of areas that we will want to take forward in the future. So the point that we're at in the process now, Chair, is that we've considered those self-assessment findings. we're now consulting with people on what do people think about the judgments that we've drawn. What do they think that we could do differently and to do better, and what should our priorities be into the future? We'll bring you a report then, Chair, summarising all of those once the consultation process concludes. Those areas for improvement that I just ran through, as well as the feedback from the consultation, will then be used to construct the annual delivery plan for next year. So that's a really quick overview of what's been a detailed piece of work for the last few months.
Yeah, thank you again, Tom, for going a quick whistle-stop tour through that. I'm sure we could spend half a day on it in some respects, but we're at where we're at the moment, because obviously it's a new piece of legislation that we've been brought in. So this is the first year where, you know, the statutory process is there. So any questions? Councillor Hooper?
A couple of specific questions in the body of the report. And one of them, and it just surprised me, I'm looking at page 20, they was talking about the marina, and it says that it references the success of the bid for the marina. Is this just expecting that bid to be successful, or is it an accurate representation of where we are today? Because I don't think there's been an announcement to that. And then I've got some comments, so that's just a specific question.
Can we deal with comments after questioning? Thanks. Nigel, you're in green. Do you want to raise a question?
This may be his connection with broadband.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Oh, disappeared now. I've just got a few little questions. I think the discussion we had previously is section 90, it was, not 92, so my correction. The consultation, which is now going on with the council staff, key businesses, the trade unions, and that. Obviously, that's not complete at the moment. And I think that will be essential for us to see at the next meeting, because the view of those cohorts of individuals may be completely different to the view of the members and the officers of the authority. Clearly, certainly the trade unions may have a completely different view, but I don't know yet until we see that. And I think once we see that, then we as a committee can give our view back to Cabinet. And my understanding from the legislation is that we can give a very specific view on some issues if we wish, and Cabinet then either have to adopt them or give us a reason as to why they're not going to adopt them. I think that's what the provisions of legislation say. So I think that will be very important for us to see when it comes through, when the next report comes through. I think the other thing, which, and again, I think you picked it up, that, you know, in that big long list of things to do, really, is the issue is, yeah, it's great when an authority's got green, amber. But for me, are there any services or functionality of this authority which is actually red and actually do need that attention being brought forward? Now, I think, you know, in my experience, sometimes people are in denial about things are happening or they're not happening, and therefore don't wish to raise them. They only wish to raise the really good things that are happening. But for any authority to improve, there may be some areas in certain directorates, I think, which can be picked up from audit reports and that, where actually a little bit more focus could be given onto it, rather than, I'm not saying the easy things to do, but some of the issues may be a little bit more difficult to do, and therefore if it's impacting on the public, then those items need to be addressed. Obviously I didn't know what was in the long list because I can't read it from here, but if there's 2 or 3 pages of that, that's just a, you know, a question for me, is where's that sort of, whilst it goes through the management team, through the councillors, through the directorate management teams, etc., where's that sort of checks and balance there in regards to, whilst I understand peer assessment, that they are actually identifying areas which actually may need improvement.
Thank you, Chair. Addressing Councillor Hooper's point about the marina, the reference should be the successful submission of the bid into the UK government, not looking as if that has been decided. We haven't had an announcement yet. It is imminent, I understand, but no announcement as yet. Absolutely, in terms of the consultation process, Chair, you will receive the full details of the consultation process to inform your reflections on our judgment, and your interpretation of the Act is as the same as mine in terms of being able to make those specific comments, and for Cabinet then to address each of them in turn before full Council. In terms of the identification of any particular areas within directorates for improvement, those would come through in a couple of different ways. Firstly, the quarterly monitoring reports, where elected members will see any slippage that is made against an action or a measure, and that's at service level, that's shown as a red status, is shown as an exception within those reports to enable elected members through the scrutiny process to be able to look and identify those and to challenge the remedial action which is proposed by service managers. And also within the report that's before you this evening, you will also see the detail in the appendices in terms of those areas, as you say, Chair, that need to be improved. One of those is a commitment to more of an ongoing picture of engagement and insight throughout the year, so that what we're doing is using an ongoing conversation to inform a judgment on performance. The consultation on this statutory document is very much the end of a process, whereas what I want to be doing is more clearly demonstrating throughout the year the voice of service users and our colleagues, including the trade unions.
Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions from me, Tom, or maybe comments. My understanding, the direction of travel boxes, it might just be my thinking, but I'm looking at those, and I was expecting in an annual report a assessment of where we are against where we thought we'd be 12 months ago. But I think if I'm reading it right, they are a direction of travel versus the previous quarter. I'd like to understand, I guess, the rationale for that versus whether whether into those objectives we think we've achieved what we should achieve or have achieved. And the second point, I guess, is more from a numeric basis. When we're saying we've given a green grading, or amber or red, if that was the case, are there actually numeric thresholds for those? Are there percentage numeric thresholds? Does it depend on the importance of relative things? I guess I'm looking at some of them have maybe 5% of red, some of them maybe 16% of red, and they're both green. So I just want to understand where we've come to from that perspective.
Thank you very much. In terms of the directions of travel, you are right there at the end of that quarter. The data in terms of whether we've achieved what we said we would do is probably best illustrated, I think, on the bottom of page 16 of the annual self-assessment report, where it just breaks down at the end of the year the performance status against actions and measures, so you can see how those are distributed and therefore how they're picked up. It is done, Matthew, in terms of a numerical value, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will confirm to committee by email. And of course that is a relatively subjective numerical measure, because what it doesn't do is weight in any way the importance of any relevant actions or measures. We have considered that in the past. It's really difficult to do, given the kind of breadth of the different types of actions. So for kind of simplicity's sake, it's a kind of indicator. But yes, it is. There's a numerical threshold, and via Gareth, I'll make sure that that's confirmed to you.
I think that makes perfect sense to me, Tom. I guess my follow-up question, I'd be interested if you completely understand the point about the difficulty in setting numerical thresholds, but the obvious question is if there's anything that's considered really high priority in those reds, and so we should be aware of them and take into account decision and any other scrutiny committees in turn.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly through the quarterly monitoring reports where I draw members' attention to those exceptions, absolutely that's where you see that challenge, and scrutiny committees definitely respond to that. We make sure that we highlight those exceptions explicitly within the presentation of those reports so that there is that challenge on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Matthew. Is Nigel back online, or? Oh, right. No other questions? No. We got some comments. Can I deal with the comments then? And if Nigel does come on, if you'd allow, well, I'll allow it that he can raise some questions if he comes back on. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. This is a bit of a broad comment on the report, and I think there's a risk that we go into a bit of motherhood and apple pie in some regards, because it's obviously a self-assessment. And one of the things, if you look at when you start to talk about the cost of living crisis, and this narrative will obviously build into your future work plan as well, so it's really important that we get the narrative right. And I think we're in danger of underplaying the seriousness in this narrative of the cost of living crisis. And I appreciate things are changing by the hour at the moment rather than even by the week. But the risk that you're referencing here is that this could disrupt our ability to achieve all the things that we want to achieve. And the response as it's set at the moment is that there's a cost of living working group. And it strikes me that's quite underwhelming in its what it's done and what it's set out to do. So I think this is a broad thing, so I think the narrative needs to be appropriate. And then further down, there's I think quite a worrying sentence that talks about the statutory duty to fulfil the most basic of needs within social services. And we talked about social services at our last meeting. And you know, if the headline this is about supporting the most vulnerable people in the Vale, then we're talking about those at the moment. And I worry whether that's been underplayed as well. And I suppose the last one, and this is a bit of a more of a throwaway comment as well, is that we reference the purchase of Aberthaw Power Station to deliver green projects with no detail whatsoever. Now, I appreciate that's the responsibility of the Cardiff City region in this regard, but we as members need to feel like we've got some scrutiny of that proposal. And at the moment, it feels to me as if it's very, very light. So I'd appreciate just some thoughts on those three areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I guess in broad terms, this report is covering the 2021-22 year. And what we've tried to do is use the themes from the current annual delivery plan to almost retrospectively look back at the activity that was underway. So in terms of cost of living crisis at that point, we were still very much, I suppose, seeing the economic impacts of things like furlough from the pandemic, some of the tumult that was in our finances in terms of increased demand, but also the amount of grant funding that was coming through. And I take the point in terms of the narrative around cost of living, and at the session that I'm running with Cabinet and the Strategic Leadership Team on Monday to look at the annual delivery plan, the narrative around cost of living will be very different in the next year's annual delivery plan because, as you say, events economically and socially moving incredibly quickly at the moment. The work that cost of living group has done to date has very much been in terms of designing the response around things like the discretionary cost of living scheme that Welsh Government have provided funding for. We're starting some work now around the delivery of warm spaces across the county throughout the the autumn and winter, and also aligning that with our food insecurity work. So I think elected members will start to see a lot more of that work coming through, and there will be a report coming to Cabinet within the next couple of months on that one. In terms of the reference around that statutory duty to fulfil the most basic of needs, again, providing care and support to people is becoming incredibly challenging in the domiciliary care market, and this committee saw a report recently around the market fragility in social care as part of the corporate risk register. So that one is absolutely being managed. And in terms of Aberthaw, I'm aware that Cabinet received the minutes of the City Region Cabinet, and I suppose that would be the first part of being able to see some visibility on those projects. And I'm aware that specific schemes are also reported through to the Environment and Regeneration Committee. So if there are any specific queries, I can certainly liaise with my colleague, the Director of Place, to answer them.
No. Okay, any? No? Yes?
Nigel can hear and see us speak. He's not unable to, he's unable to speak.
Right.
So we'll have to just apologise on our behalf.
Yeah, okay. Perhaps if Nigel's got any questions which he can't address at this meeting, then would you mind, Tom, if he certainly wrote in, as long as they don't have any fundamental change to what we're discussing here, if you've got any questions that if people are happy with, because it's a little bit unfair if he can't raise any questions. So if people are happy with that.
Absolutely, and if any other members of the committee who've provided apologies this evening want to comment on the draft judgments, we can absolutely take.
Because obviously, we're going to see this again anyway.
Yeah.
But what I wouldn't want is a fundamental question to be missed when dealing with this. Okay, if there's no one else have any comments. There's no recommendations for us in this report. Obviously, all we've received is what the resolution of Cabinet was. So I assume that we are just to note the... so we note the comments of Cabinet and endorse the process at the moment. And we await the follow-up report in October. Are people happy with that? Because, okay. Someone prepared to move that? Matthew, thank you. And seconder, Councillor Hooper. Thank you very much. All in favour? Yep, that's carried. Next item is item 6, which is the Audit Wales Work Programme Timetable 22-23 for the Vale of Glamorgan Council. Do we have our colleague from Audit Wales online?
We don't, sorry, Chair.
Okay. Can I suggest then we defer that to the next meeting? Would that be okay? And then obviously we can pick it up. It's next month, the next meeting, so you can pick that up next month. Everyone content with that? We just defer that till next meeting. Then we got the Corporate Complaints Annual Report. Tom again.
I was hoping that you'd have another voice from my colleague in Audit Wales. The agenda had been constructed to give you a break from me. Thank you very much, Chair. This, again, is part of the Part 6 duties under the Act, is that your committee get to see the annual report on complaints and compliments. And the report that's set out before you this evening has got 2 appendices to it. Appendix A shows you the Council's corporate complaints and compliments report for the previous financial year. And what we want to do through having that complaints process, which the Ombudsman has expressed their content with, is make sure that we gain insight into the level of satisfaction with our services, understand how satisfied customers are, and make sure that we've got a robust process for investigating and managing those complaints, understanding how responsive to statutory guidance and customer expectations we are, and improving our services. So again, a kind of refrain with the ongoing performance duties. The report at Appendix A shows you that we've got a pretty sort of average level of complaints in comparison with the long-term trend, so 358 being received. Overall, complainants are satisfied with how complaints are investigated. The responsiveness in terms of adhering to the timelines for managing those complaints has continued to decline in the year, though. Complaint handling is meeting the requirements of statutory bodies, so from an assurance perspective, it's there. But we do need to make more of a focus on learning from complaints, and the report specifically identifies particular areas that we can do that. The Public Service Ombudsman for Wales has got a role as well in receiving and handling complaints that are made to that office. Appendix B to the report this evening, Chair, sets out the annual letter from the Ombudsman. It provides members with a series of comparable data with other local authorities. And what you'll see from the report is that 61 complaints were made to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales during the period. That's a significant increase on the 38 that were received in the previous year. But when you look at the breakdown of those, a number were discounted as being out of jurisdiction, so 19, 14 were closed after initial consideration. So the judgments received are roughly comparable from our interpretation. You'll see in the report itself that it breaks down the complaints by directorate. We use this as a leadership team and provide the information to our directorate management teams on a quarterly basis for discussion. It's also monitored through the Insight Board so that there is a constant eye on these particular areas of our work. In the last year, we've also adopted a couple of new policies which are aligned with this, and committee have previously asked for an update to be included within the complaints and compliments report on an annual basis around the unacceptable actions by citizens policy. That's not been applied to any of our citizens in this period, so therefore there is no update. And in terms of the social media policy, that's only been applied to 3 people in terms of being blocked or muted on the council's social media account. So that was just a bit of an addendum to the report. So it's been brought to you this evening to consider as part of that performance duty, and in order to allow us to respond back to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales in terms of the action we're going to take, which is what's set out in the report.
Thank you, Tom. Questions? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Tom. I noticed that you're changing the system that is being used. Does that represent any risks that we should be aware of, or do you expect it to be a smooth transition? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Yes, you're absolutely right. Currently, the complaints are managed through Oracle CRM. I think it's fair to say that system has served us well, but it's got a very early 2000s feel to it. The system that's it's being replaced with is a product called Granicus Firm Step. That's been rolled out now over the last 9 or 10 months for use in the contact centre. Complaints and compliments are at the end of that process, so I'm confident actually that that will be relatively seamless. The team have got lots of learning now in terms of how that system works, and in comparison to some of the other processes that are being managed through it, especially around adult social care referrals, for example. These are relatively straightforward from a kind of process and function perspective. So it actually should offer a real opportunity to both improve the way those are handled, because things like automated reminders, much better and timely reporting is possible through the system, and it's generally a lot easier to use. So I'd be confident from an assurance perspective there shouldn't be any concerns.
Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. I think you've quite rightly cited the primary concern I had on recording the causes of complaints and the inability that really gives you to do good root cause analysis and inherently then solve issues of future complaints potentially. So I guess I was just looking for a bit more context on, I think the paper cites the actions, but what those actions are, who's going to be tracking them, whether we're comfortable they're going to be achieved, and what are you looking to do within the next 3, 6, 9 months that will alleviate some of that pain?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And doing a number of things actually. increasing the visibility of the reporting of this information on a more regular basis. So those quarterly reports that I mentioned, and coming to SLT for us to challenge around whether those causes of complaints are being accurately recorded or not, building that into the system that actually it mandates having to do that, and looking to remove the option around no learning, for example, because that's something that shouldn't be an option, because there is always an opportunity to reflect on our learning. So it's having a greater focus and visibility, I think, Matthew.
Couple of questions from me, if there's no questions.
Councillor Good-John.
Oh, Councillor Goodjohn.
May I see him? We should be able to hear him.
Are you there, Councillor Goodjohn? Councillor Goodjohn, if you are there, we can't hear you, unfortunately. No.
Come back, Chair.
Sorry, we'll have to try and come back to you, but again, if we can't get to you via the technology, then I'm sure that Tom will take any questions you have in writing. Can I just raise a couple of myself? On the second page, first black bullet point, what does it actually mean by complainants are satisfied with how complaints are investigated? What does that actually mean? Because obviously lots of people who make complaints, they're normally not satisfied with the outcome. Some will be, but some won't. So I just want to know what that actually means, Tom. Second question is, are councillors' complaints registered? So if Councillor A comes into the council and raises an issue that he's had a complaint from a resident or a constituent, are they captured anywhere? Because obviously sometimes if they're not captured, then the figures can be a little bit skewed. In regards to complaints, does every complainant get feedback as to how their complaint has been dealt with and what's going to happen? I think picking up point from Councillor Hooper, do directorates learn lessons? Do they bring complaints together? So if there's a very specific area where they're receiving lots and lots of complaints, there's a lesson for learning there. And I think picking up Matthew's point then is who monitors that to ensure that the service delivery is varied or not, to ensure that those issues are dealt with and taken forward. Social services and school complaints, clearly they've both got separate complaints procedures to the corporate complaints. And I'm just a little unsure as to whether we can just look at those in an overall view in regards to how they're handling. Clearly schools have got their own complaints process, and I don't know whether we want to start delving into that. But it's just ensuring that, there is an appropriate process for people to make those complaints. And the final one is the Public Service Ombudsman annual report. Whilst we've got an extract here, does the Public Service Ombudsman annual report come to this committee in total as a background paper or wherever? Those are my questions.
Thank you, Chair. Taking those in the order that you raised them, in terms of satisfaction with the handling of complaints, we measure that by the resolution rate at stage 1 of the complaints process, and 90% of complaints are resolved at stage 1 and therefore don't progress. So we take that as a measure of satisfaction. If a councillor raises on behalf of a resident a formal complaint via the council's contact centre, yes, it would be then registered as a complaint through the complaints process. It does give a good opportunity to, I suppose, describe the difference between requesting a service, so a missed collection of a bin wouldn't be considered a complaint. A persistent missing of refuse collection would be, if somebody wanted to make a formal complaint about it. In terms of complainants' feedback, absolutely. Stage 1 and 2 require the council under our policy to write explaining the conclusion that we've drawn to their complaint and setting out the reasons why we've drawn that conclusion, as well as advising on any further course of action that can be taken under that policy. And once it gets to stage 2, also referring to the ability for people to make a complaint to the Ombudsman for their investigation as well. In terms of the way that the complaints and compliments data is used, the reports that are generated on a quarterly basis are done at a directorate level. They're provided to my colleagues across the council in terms of their directorate management teams at the same time as we request updates against corporate performance. So it's given very much to have that kind of contextual discussion within directorate management teams, and we then reflect on those in that quarterly monitoring report. So you see a kind of thread of complaints being used throughout the year. We do need to get better at recording the outcomes, the causes of those complaints, though, in order for those discussions to be more meaningful. And I think the report does draw that out. There are some headline data in here around the social services complaints. You're right, it is a separate process, but we thought it was useful to bring it for context. In terms of the schools complaint processes, they're overseen by governing bodies, so I think that's where the assurance would sit. And in terms of the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, they used to produce an annual report, but they now have moved to only the annual letter that is in Appendix B. Much of the information is still the same in terms of those comparison tables, but the onus is very much on us then to respond to that letter in order to outline how we're going to demonstrate that we've taken the learning forward. So committee will note that feedback was requested by the 30th of September. Because of the changes to the schedule of meetings of committee and cabinet, we've requested a slight extension just to enable your committee to consider it, and then cabinet to consider your views, and then we'll be providing that feedback.
Give it that, Tom. The only issue is I do have with the complainants, just because they don't go on to stage 2, does that mean the complainant is satisfied? If you know what I mean. And is there a process that you sort of litmus test with complainants, how their complaint was dealt with?
I was typing slower to give myself a couple of minutes to think about the answer to that one, Chair. I suppose that they are satisfied with the conclusion that has been drawn, because if you disagree, if you made a complaint and that complaint was not upheld and you disagreed with that, I would imagine that complainants would then want to progress to stage 2 of the process. And the fact that 9 in 10 of them are being resolved at that and not then going on to stage 2, I think is an indication of satisfaction. I think there is an opportunity to do some feedback work, perhaps with complainants, though, in terms of the process and handling. But the overall satisfaction rate, I think we could take as an indicator of satisfaction there.
Okay, I'm not going to raise it anymore. Thank you. If there's no other questions, any comments? No. If we go to the recommendations, then there are 4 recommendations on page 3 of the report. That the committee note the contents of the report in Appendix A. That the committee continues to receive an annual update in relation to corporate complaints and compliments. That the Governance and Audit Committee consider the annual letter from the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, Appendix B, in the context of the annual complaints and compliments report, and that the committee refer this report and comments of the committee on the above matters to Cabinet for their consideration. Obviously, I'm sure, Gareth, you can pick up some of the points that were raised in the questions and that. Someone prepared to move, please? Councillor Hooper, someone prepared to second? Councillor Evans. Everyone in favour? Thank you very much. It's carried. Item 8 then is the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales homelessness reviewed an open door to positive change action on suggested recommendations to non-investigated authorities. We've got no one online, presumably?
We should have my colleague Mike Ingram, the head of housing, to take this report.
Is he there?
for you, Chair.
You should be loading up.
Mike, are you there?
Hello, Mike. Mike, can you say something, please? Apologies,
Tom,
Chair.
do you want to deal with this report, or should we defer it? It's up to you.
I'm happy to take this one for you, Chair, if you're content. With apologies that it's the Tom show for you this evening.
Well, no, I think we're grateful for you being here, because if you hadn't, it may have been a Matt show, but which would have been quite an interesting challenge. You know, and I understand the difficulties with technology, and clearly, you know, it's very difficult. But Tom, if you're happy to take it, carry on.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. So this report is being brought to your committee this evening, Chair, very much as part of the way that we handle regulatory reports. You'll remember that when we have a report from one of our regulators like Audit Wales and equally the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, we bring it to your committee as well as to scrutiny committees in order that you can see the Council's response to that particular report and what it is that we're proposing to do. This particular piece of work was undertaken specifically within a number of local authorities, but the Ombudsman drew some conclusions, rather, that the office felt that applied to all local authorities in the review of homelessness report. And Appendix A sets out the results of that particular report. What we've done in the report here is, at Appendix B, give you a breakdown of the Council's response to the various areas that the Ombudsman has suggested that each local authority needs to do. So the actions are listed and an update is given in terms of the progress. Committee will note that the report is a couple of years old. The Ombudsman has written recently to request that we respond formally, and we take that response through the Governance and Audit Committee. So you'll see that my colleagues in Housing have provided an update against each of the actions. The vast majority are complete, given the time that's gone on, with a number that are in progress and due for completion. Because of the timing of your meeting and the hiatus that we had recently during the national period of mourning, this is coming to your committee before it's gone to the scrutiny committee, which would ordinarily be the other way around. So what we're proposing that we will do is request that you consider the report, refer that on to the Council's Cabinet for them to consider, and this report then will go to the relevant scrutiny committee for their information in due course. Your committee then, Chair, will see an update regularly against these regulatory recommendations as part of that standard tracking process. So you'll note you get a mid-year report on those, as well as it coming as part of the end-of-year report as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Tom. Any questions, Councillor Hooper?
Just on the action of reviewing use of alternative communication methods, WhatsApp, text, etc. And I note that progress is still to be finished on that particular item. And I just wanted to make the point. So I've actually dealt helping somebody supporting somebody at the moment who is homeless, who's trying to engage with the council and is struggling with that engagement. And one of the reasons is because although they've got a phone, they don't have any data capacity to be able to text and WhatsApp. And I think it's not as simple as just you'll get them to message you and they'll get an answer. And I think it's something that I would just like to be referenced in this as a point. There are alternatives that don't take data, and I think they should be investigated along beside these two. Thanks.
I think our colleague from Housing has joined us. Can you hear us?
I can, Chair.
Good, and we can hear
committee
you.
Hear me?
Yes, we can. Did you get that question? I don't know whether Tom wants to answer it or whether you can answer it.
Yes, I did. Apologies, first of all. I've had to refresh access to committee, and everything now seems to be working fine. So apologies
No, that's okay.
for that, Chair. Can I just introduce myself, first of all, for members of the committee? My name is Mike Ingram. I'm the Head of Housing, Community Safety and Building Services at the Council. And the area that Tom and I could hear Tom, has gone over is an area that falls under my responsibility. Just a little bit of background, perhaps, to the report that Tom has introduced to you. The Wales Housing Act 2014 introduced a fundamental change to the way local authorities consider their homelessness duties, a whole raft of new legislation, and this authority, together with many other authorities at pace, introduced processes and procedures to respond to the legislation. Clearly, with any new piece of legislation, challenge will come down the road, and improvements and best practice will evolve as questions arise. And I guess the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales, this is his first opportunity to review, since the implementation of the legislation, some of those procedural issues which are outlined in the report. One thing I would note, and you will note in Appendix B, which Tom has alluded to, that a number of the actions that have been identified in the report by the Public Services Ombudsman, both in terms of those actions against the 3 local authorities mentioned, but also the 4 actions that are outlined for all local authorities, you'll note that many of them were already completed prior to the publishing of the Ombudsman's report. There's a number of reasons for that. One is that at the time that we introduced the new legislation, statute duties in 2014-15, we engaged with Shelter Cymru at that time in terms of our interpretation of the legislation. And I guess you can see through the full report, which is highlighted in the report before you, Shelter Cymru make a number of recommendations in line of this report as well. We do have a Shelter Cymru advocate who is embedded within the housing service part-time, and sits next to the housing options team, our housing solutions team, who provide the services to homelessness inquiries. So just to give you a little bit of background, I suppose in terms of where the Ombudsman's report is coming from. In terms of the particular question that was posed, I think it was by Councillor Hooper.
Yes.
Just to clarify that social media and technology is not the only way that the department clearly deal with issues. We do provide drop-in services at the council offices, and we also provide a range of and facilitate through our housing support grants a number of advice services throughout the Vale of Glamorgan. And we've recently opened a housing advice, or POBL, commissioned by the Vale of Glamorgan Council, have opened a housing advice service just up the road in one of the former shops in Houghton Road. And that was formally opened a couple of months ago by the leader of the council. So just to reassure members, online isn't the only option for customers who may have an issue or a difficulty or require a review. We do an awful lot face-to-face. We take account of the fact that many of the homeless clients that come before us are vulnerable. Some of them are very vulnerable. We provide housing-related support to those clients to act as independent advocates and mentors. Particularly, this area is very complex. It is very as I've mentioned, very legalistic in terms of the way that provisions are made. So we do whatever we can to ensure that the service is as open and transparent, and decision making can be challenged at any point. but I thought it was just worth referencing a little bit of the background. Thank you, Chair.
Happy with that, Councillor Hooper? Okay. Any other questions? Matthew?
Yeah, just one from me. Thanks for the report, Mike. It's good to see that a number of the actions have completion dates, I guess, and have them being implemented. I guess the obvious question when I read something like this, when a report comes after those actions have been taken, is how comfortable are you that those processes where you're saying they've been in place previously are continue to be robust, especially given if we're having to make a formal update or attestation to say, yes, this is as expected?
Thank you for the question. I mentioned that we have a Shelter Cymru employee who's actually embedded within the service. Decisions that are appealed or requests for review are automatically referred to Shelter Cymru. And I think in terms of where I take my comfort is that in terms of Shelter Cymru as an advocate organisation for homelessness clients who have their own legal advisors and can and do take action against local authorities for consideration of decisions, we've not had a request from Shelter Cymru or a letter from Shelter Cymru threatening adverse legal action against the local authority. The report, I think, highlights the fact that the majority of reviews, and the Ombudsman did find that the majority of reviews to decisions were satisfied by negotiation. I think it's fair to say that, as I say, the process we have is that any request for review is automatically passed to Shelter Cymru for consideration. And we receive, we have very few reviews of our decisions, but those that we do have are resolved without any litigation or any threat of litigation.
Okay, great. So I guess for me to be clear in my mind, you're very comfortable that all of those actions, even the ones that predate that report, the controls are fully in place.
The controls are fully in place, and the council's internal audit processes regularly review our service and our adherence to regulations and those of our statutory regulators. I'm not aware personally of any adverse comments from either internal regulation or external regulation, certainly not in the last 4 or 5 years.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. I had a similar question to Matthew. My question was going to be in regards to completion date. So what? On the basis that the vast majority were all undertaken prior to the report, which came out in October 2021. There was one action obviously completed back in 2015, which is 8 years ago. And I'm just wondering whether it's a presentation matter, even though they were completed back in 2015, 2019, is the actual position should be is, look, they've been regularly reviewed, if they have, over the last 12 months on an ongoing basis. So, you know, it could possibly say, look, we addressed this in 2019, but it was reviewed in 2021 and it was found to be safe. Because I would just be a little bit concerned myself. If I was the Ombudsman, I'd say, well, yeah, so what? Are they up to date? Are they current? Are they robust? And I understand the issue with Shelter Cymru and that. And I think you may be doing yourself quite an injustice, really, by saying they were done, you know, 8 years ago or 4 years ago, where actually you could say they were reviewed last year and they're robust. And it's the same point Matthew was making, I think, is that assurance that you need to give the Ombudsman that this council is delivering what it needs to deliver in a timely manner. It's taken on board what the report says, and you say, as at now, they are robust. I don't know, you know, obviously it's just a question for me is actually, are you doing yourself an injustice?
I appreciate that comment, Chair. You're probably right. I think we probably don't shout as loudly perhaps as some of our good services as perhaps we could and should. I think in terms of the actions and why they were completed earlier than the Ombudsman's report, these are actions that have previously been reported through the Insight Tracker and through the Council's SLT previously from a report from the Wales Audit Office. And it's interesting that the Ombudsman's service has highlighted some years later the same issues for those three local authorities particularly that were actually picked up a number of years previously, which is why the dates predate the report. We expose ourselves frequently to independent inspection. We've previously exposed ourselves to independent oversight as a sector, but also as a council in terms of our practices. And we've received assurance from those oversights that our practices are robust and demonstrate good practice. But I agree with you. We can, with assurance, be able to indicate to the local government ombudsman that we continue to provide good service. I think Tom's earlier report also reflects, and we talked earlier about learning. How do we learn from our reports? And you'll note that from that report, the local authorities had no case of maladministration in relation to its homelessness service, again for a number of years, 4 or 5 years. And again, I take some comfort that even with escalated cases, even with outcomes that aren't satisfied at stage 1 or stage 2, where those cases could automatically go through to local government ombudsman for investigation, that those cases haven't come to the fore.
Thanks, Mike. I do think you're doing yourself an injustice. If you sent Appendix B to the Ombudsman, if I was the Ombudsman's representative, I say, well, the Vale looked at this one item in 2015 and they've done nothing since. So I think it's a presentation issue, really, and maybe, you know, no criticism of you, Mike, because I can understand you're doing a very good job, but it's just to convey to the Ombudsman, we're not complacent here. We've reviewed whatever we've reviewed. It's fit for purpose as at now, and therefore I think it should be reflected in this report. That's my only comment. Obviously, it's a matter for you officers to take on board whether that's a reasonable consideration to take on board. But that would be my view, is that, you know, I think you're doing yourself an injustice. Okay.
I agree, and we could update those recommendations to reflect that they are green now as they were in 2019.
Yeah, lovely. I think, you know, well, Tom can have a discussion, presumably, with yourself. Are there any other questions from anyone? Any comments? No? You see the recommendations then? The recommendations are on page 3. The committee considers the recommendations of the Public Services Ombudsman report and his letter to the Council at Appendix A. Notes the Council progress made at Appendix B, with any recommendation, comments being referred to Cabinet for their consideration and endorsement of progress. So if you could pick up those points, and I think those dates need to be amended, in my opinion. And subject to recommendation 1, the Governance and Audit Committee recommend to Cabinet that following its consideration that Council's progress update is forwarded to the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales by no later than 30th of September 2022 as per the request, but I think it's been extended slightly So obviously, by the due date that the Ombudsman's agreed. So is everyone happy and content with that? Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Matthew. Seconded, Councillor Hooper. All in favour? Thank you. That matter's carried. We then got item 9, which is the... Thank you, Mike. You've disappeared, but thank you for that. Item 9 then is the the updated forward work programme for us to consider. Matt, you doing this one?
Yeah, I'll pick this up this evening.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Over to you then.
So this is a standing item on your agenda. It looks at the programme through to the end of the civic year and a little bit more detail about the items coming forward to the next meeting, which is the 24th of October. We did have quite a potentially busy agenda on that date, so that's why we've brought the corporate complaints forward this evening, and we're pushing the whistleblowing report back until December. But still a busy agenda with 7 items. We've got the regular standing items of the Audit Wales reports and the updated forward work programme. I'm sure we'll have Audit Wales colleagues along with us next time round, as we'll also have the audited statement of accounts and annual governance statement on the agenda, and as part of that item we'll have the draft, if not final, ISA. The work on the statement of accounts and the audit is progressing. There is a national issue that you need to be aware of around accounting for infrastructure. That's ping-ponging at the moment between SIPFA, the accounting body for the public sector, and FRAB, which is the Financial Reporting Advisory Board. There are a couple of issues around the gross cost of infrastructure assets in authorities' books, and also the way in which they were accounting for accumulated depreciation. There's sort of resolution of the gross cost issue, and there won't be a requirement to disclose that going forward. But there's still some disagreement about the accumulated depreciation, and that's outstanding. That if that's not resolved, that will possibly delay Audit Wales from issuing their opinion. We then have a couple of other standard reports: the Internal Audit Progress Report, Internal Audit Recommendation Monitoring Report, Corporate Risk Register, and as per the earlier item, we'll be bringing back the annual self-assessment post-consultation. That's all.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions?
Can I just make a comment, Chair? I think we discussed...
Is it a question or a comment?
Comment.
Right.
Sorry.
Questions first.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Comments? Thank you.
I shall return. I think we discussed this previously. And forgive me because I can't remember exactly where we ended. I think I was keen, and obviously the committee can make a decision, on seeing the progress report for internal audit and the recommendation monitoring report more frequently. If I'm going to be so bold, ideally in every committee. Not to be discussed at every committee, just to get an idea that the internal audits we're expecting to be on track are on track, and any recommendations that are slipping or anything to highlight from that perspective. So I wonder whether I could raise that for consideration going forward.
Matt?
The monitoring report is a live document, so I'm sure Mark and Joan will be able to bring that forward to every meeting.
Any other comments? Councillor Hooper?
Just a brief one. Do we need to start that meeting earlier if we've got a big agenda? So are we going to get through it in enough time?
Can you consider that, Tom, with Gareth? Are you happy to consider that? Because if it's going to be fairly weighty, then...
Yeah, certainly a good suggestion, I think, given the weight of some of those and importance of those items. So, yeah, certainly we'll work in Democratic to have a look at that.
Okay, if there are no other comments, move the recommendations. We consider, well, we've considered it, but we note the forward work programme. Number 2 is that we endorse the schedule of items for the next meeting on the 24th of October 2020, obviously subject to looking at the timing of it. Confirm a list of people it would like to invite for each item. Presumably the officers will bring them in any event. the additional information, if we could pick up in the recommendation the point that Matthew's raised, so that they come to each committee meeting, and subject to that, someone prepared to move. Councillor Hooper, thank you. Seconded. Thank you, Matthew. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10, any other items which the Chair has decided are urgent? There aren't any. We're not going to go into exempt matters because there aren't any. So can I just say thank you for those who turned up. Thank you those who are on screen or on a remote attendance who can actually hear us but can't speak to us. And thank you for your patience. I now close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Always a pleasure to see you.
You all too, and I managed to speak. Thank you very much. Good night.
Can I thank Tom, Gareth, Matt and Mark for attending. Sorry it was a one-man show, Neely, and certainly Mike for coming in